"That is forbidden," she whispered, her breath barely stirring the night air. Yet the weight of those words struck him harder than thunder. "And if you stay with this story until the very end, you'll understand how a single whisper rooted in kindness and love can shake an entire town." So don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel now if heartfelt romance and human courage speak to you. The ranch lay quiet beneath a sky brushed with stars, fences stretching like patient lines across the land. Daniel had lived here all his life, believing the land taught people how to love, slowly, honestly, with respect. When he first saw her standing near the gate that evening, he felt it immediately. She didn't belong to the noise of towns or the cruelty of haste. Her name was Elena, and she carried herself with gentle caution, as though the world had taught her to step softly. A sudden storm had forced her to seek shelter, and Daniel, guided by instinct rather than thought, had opened his door without question. Kindness to him wasn't heroic, it was normal. But as the fire crackled and the wind pressed against the windows, the space between them filled with something unspoken yet warm. Elena spoke carefully, choosing words the way one chooses fragile glass. She spoke of her journey of loss and quiet endurance, and Daniel listened without interrupting. There was a tenderness in the way he listened that surprised her. No hunger, no judgment, only attention. Love, she realized, didn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived as safety. When their eyes met, something settled between them, soft and undeniable. Yet when the moment deepened, when closeness brushed against vulnerability, Elena lowered her gaze and whispered those words. "That is forbidden." Not with fear, but with respect. Daniel understood immediately. It wasn't about desire denied, it was about boundaries honored, about histories that demanded care, about love that refused to wound. Daniel stepped back, not away from her, but toward what was right. He spoke gently, assuring her that nothing would be taken that wasn't freely given, that affection without respect wasn't love at all. His restraint wasn't cold, it was compassionate. Elena felt tears rise, not of disappointment, but relief. She had expected pressure. Instead, she found patience. Romance in that moment was not a touch, but a promise: "You are safe here." The ranch seemed to breathe with them, the fire steady, the night kind. Daniel felt his heart open not through possession, but through understanding. He realized love could be powerful without crossing lines, intimate without haste. As the night deepened, they talked. About dreams deferred, about places that felt like home, about how kindness could heal things words could not. Elena shared why certain things were forbidden, hinting at a town bound by rules that confused tradition with control. Daniel listened, realizing that love sometimes asks us to stand against silence. He didn't yet know how deeply her presence would affect Greyfall, or how understanding her boundaries would become an act of courage. For now he offered her rest, warmth, and respect. When she finally smiled, a small, grateful smile, Daniel knew something meaningful had begun, not because it rushed forward, but because it chose care. Outside, the town slept unaware, wrapped in habits and half-truths. Inside the ranch house, two hearts learned that romance rooted in kindness doesn't break rules. It reveals which ones matter. Daniel watched the fire dim and felt certain that love, when guided by respect, has the quiet strength to change more than just two lives. And somewhere in that calm, the first tremor of change began. Soft as a whisper, strong enough to be heard by an entire town. Morning light crept gently across the ranch, turning the fields gold and softening the edges of everything it touched. Daniel rose early, not out of habit this time, but out of awareness. The night before hadn't been dramatic, yet it lingered in his chest with a quiet intensity. Elena was already awake, standing by the window with a cup of tea, watching the land as if it were speaking to her. They exchanged a small smile, no awkwardness, no regret, only mutual respect. Kindness, Daniel realized, had a way of making mornings easier. Over breakfast they talked easily, the kind of conversation that flows when nothing is being hidden. Elena asked about the ranch, about the people of Greyfall, about the traditions that seemed to shape every life here. Daniel answered honestly, though he noticed how often his explanations circled around what wasn't said. There were customs people followed without question, lines no one crossed. He'd accepted them all his life. Now, with Alina listening so closely, those silences felt louder. As they stepped outside, neighbors passed by on the road, offering polite nods that lingered a moment too long on Alina. She noticed it immediately. The curiosity, the quiet calculation. Daniel felt a protective instinct rise, not possessive, but caring. He introduced her warmly, proud rather than cautious. Some smiled back. Others stiffened. Love, even in its earliest form, has a way of exposing fear in others. Alina sensed it too. She leaned closer and whispered that Greyfall felt beautiful, but guarded. Daniel nodded. "We keep things neat here," he said, then added softly, "sometimes too neat." Throughout the day, Alina helped around the ranch, not because she was asked, but because she wanted to. They worked side by side, their movements falling into an easy rhythm. Conversation grew deeper, stories shared without embellishment, laughter rising naturally. Daniel felt something unfamiliar, romance built not on urgency but on admiration. He respected her strength, the way she carried herself with dignity even when she spoke of pain. Alina, in turn, noticed how Daniel treated the land, the animals, the people, with care that expected nothing in return. That kind of love, she thought, was rare. By afternoon, whispers had begun. Greyfall noticed when patterns shifted. Daniel inviting a stranger into his life and his home. Without explanation, unsettled people. When an old friend stopped by and cautioned him to be careful, Daniel understood what was truly meant. Alina represented questions, and questions threatened comfort. That evening, as they walked along the fence line, Alina finally explained more of what she had meant by forbidden. She spoke of how the town's traditions had once denied her family dignity, how kindness had been rationed by unwritten rules. She hadn't come to fight, but she refused to hide. Daniel listened heart-heavy, realizing that love sometimes asks us to confront uncomfortable truths. He felt anger, not at Alina's words, but at the quiet compliance he'd lived with. They stopped near the old oak tree, the same place Daniel's parents once stood when they chose each other against expectation. He told Alina that understanding her boundary wasn't restraint, it was respect. And respect, he believed, was the strongest form of love. Alina met his gaze, emotion bright in her eyes. She said she had never felt so valued without being claimed. The moment between them deepened, not through touch, but through trust. Daniel knew then that whatever this was, it deserved patience. As the sun dipped low, the town bell rang in the distance, calling people home. Alina sighed, sensing the weight of what lay ahead. Greyfall would notice. It always did. Daniel reached out, not to hold her but to reassure her. "You don't have to be alone here," he said. It was a promise rooted in kindness, not ownership. And as they walked back toward the house, the ranch glowing in twilight, both felt it. The quiet certainty that love built on respect doesn't just change hearts. It challenges worlds. The following days unfolded with a rhythm neither Daniel nor Alina had expected. Quiet, deliberate, yet charged with the knowledge that the town's eyes were upon them. Greyfall had begun noticing subtle changes, the way Daniel lingered longer with her in conversation, the warmth in his gestures, the absence of pretense in their interactions. Some whispered behind closed doors, their curiosity masked as concern. Others watched openly, suspicion etched into their faces. Daniel and Alina moved through it with patience, each act of kindness and consideration for the other a quiet rebellion against unspoken rules. Their mornings were spent tending to the animals and fields, evenings walking along the edge of the property, speaking in low voices about dreams, memories, and the lessons the land had taught them both. Romance grew in the details, shared meals, laughter spilling over minor mishaps, the gentle support in tasks large and small. Every gesture reinforced that love built on respect and understanding was stronger than fear or expectation. By midweek, the murmurs reached the town square. Some villagers approached with veiled warnings, hinting that Daniel's choices might bring trouble. "She's not from here," one said. "Be careful what you encourage," said another. Daniel listened without defensiveness, acknowledging their fears but refusing to compromise his principles. Alina noticed his calm, the quiet authority in his demeanor, and felt a surge of trust and admiration. Kindness had a weight to it, she realized, a weight that demanded courage. She had come to the ranch, seeking safety, and found more a man whose love was as deliberate as it was genuine. That evening, under a sky splashed with twilight, Daniel and Alina faced the consequences of visibility. A small gathering of villagers came to speak, some confrontational, others merely anxious. They questioned why Daniel allowed her presence, why he seemed so drawn to her, why he challenged traditions silently but firmly. Daniel answered with honesty, never raising his voice, never belittling anyone's fear. "Respect and kindness are not crimes," he said. "We all live under the same sky, and no one should suffer because history demanded silence." His words were met with a mix of resistance and reluctant understanding. Alina stood beside him, her presence calm, a reminder that the courage to uphold truth and compassion often inspires others to reconsider their positions. Over the next days, change began subtly. Villagers who had resisted at first noticed that Daniel and Alina's influence was not destructive, it was steadying. Fields thrived under their care, animals were tended more attentively. Children played in spaces where curiosity and courage were encouraged rather than shamed. The town began to realize that what had been forbidden was never about morality, it was about fear of change. And love, when guided by respect, had the power to challenge fear without destroying what was good. One late afternoon, after the sun had set and lanterns glowed across the ranch, Daniel and Alina sat by the old oak tree. They reflected on the past days, on whispers turned conversations, on suspicion turned understanding. They laughed softly at minor absurdities, comforted each other through the weight of scrutiny, and shared moments of quiet intimacy that weren't about possession but about presence. The world outside might resist, but within this shared space, kindness, love, and respect had taken root. Alina realized that romance wasn't about passion alone. It was about steady courage, shared vision, and the trust that grew when two hearts chose honesty over convenience. By the time night fell, the town's tension had eased, though not disappeared. Daniel and Alina walked back toward the house, hands brushing in silent affirmation. The forbidden had been spoken, the boundaries acknowledged, and the town confronted with a truth it could not ignore. They knew challenges would come again, but for now, they had chosen each other wisely and with care. And in that choice, they had discovered a love stronger than fear, a romance built not on secrecy or desire, but on the quiet, enduring power of kindness and respect. Under the first stars, Daniel and Alina stood hand in hand, certain of what they had built. The town had shifted, whispers softened, and hearts opened. Forbidden truths no longer frightened them. Love guided by kindness, respect, and courage had changed everything. If this story touched you, like the video and subscribe to the channel, because tales of brave, respectful love are always worth sharing.